Okay, gang, I accidentally created an internet sensation, and I am not ready to do a full episode on this particular device, but my inboxes are brimming with questions. So I want to make sure I get a couple of points out. This, if you haven't seen it, is the viral sensation, the Alofs magazine system for a single-shot break-action shotgun. Let me flip this over for a second. If you look at the other side, we've got a very basic shotgun. This is actually a Springfield branded version of a Stevens 94. And it has this wackadoodle thing bolted to it. This guy. Now, this Alofs has been modified. It was damaged at some point and repaired, and it's also been sort of stabilized because originally it would have had one screw point here and some other features that we'll see in a minute. But just ignore the differences for a second. Let's talk quick history. This was patented in 1924 by Herman Alofs, and he formed a company, Alofs Manufacturing, the very next year in 1925. As far as hard facts, that is as far as I have gotten because I very much prefer to have primary source material, and so I'm still in the research phase of this shotgun. I have put in some orders for some reprints and other things to confirm more. I believe the gun was offered for sale through Ivor Johnson. I'm going to try to find out how much this would have cost at the time versus a repeating shotgun. I know a lot of people have been very curious about that. I do not have that data in hand, but I will by the time we ever do a full episode on this. While we're waiting on it though, a couple of big questions. Number one, can you buy this? No, unless you find someone that owns one of the originals. It's entirely in the used collector's market. Nobody's currently making this system. It was last made sometime in the early 30s, I assume, because this one's bolted to a 1929 shotgun. That's just my rough guess. I believe it was still in catalogs as late as 27, may have been even later. Again, I've got to go spend a lot of time and a little currency to figure out when and where this appeared and disappeared. Now, the whole system is designed to be adjustable so that it can go onto a number of different break-action shotguns. So you have this forward and back adjustment point here. You have tipping adjustments here. So this whole thing is adjustable for a number of different break-action shotguns. And then as we come forward, you see the heart of the actual device. Now, this section here, this long guy, is our magazine tube with a big spring in it that's fairly powerful. This is like a reverse magazine tube, or a carrier in this case, that has its own follower. So the system has two followers and two magazine springs. A lower powered magazine spring is in here, which is going to drive our cartridge back forward. So we have two magazine springs, two followers working in opposition to each other. So it's going to feed from the more powerful magazine, and that's going to override the lighter carrier spring. It's going to shove one cartridge in there, and then it's going to bottom out, and that's going to be where she is, okay? Now, this whole carrier is biased to want to go to the right. With the gun closed, it cannot do that, so it's being held in this position. When the gun is opened, however, let me get where you guys can see this action. I'm gonna pop the lever, open the gun. She's gonna roughly stay where she is until you would have heard that click and it would have ejected a case. Let's see it from the other side for a second, because I know a lot of people are really curious about this. So what's happening is there's essentially a sort of sear rod right here, this rod right here. This guy is sprung very lightly forward. It has a, let me see if I can show it to you, it has a sloping plane on, oh good lord, it's pretty dark in there. There's a sloping plane right here at its tip. That plane is rested up against, as it just overrode itself. It's rested up against this block, okay, the stopping block. So when that tab is engaged against that block, the whole thing is held to the left so that it can fill up from the magazine and await the empty casing to clear the chamber. So at this moment, we've popped the gun open. The casing has not yet ejected. This guy's locked over. When the spent casing ejects, it's going to trip this lever. The lever is actually, this paddle lever, is what is keeping this little sear component from traveling rearward. So right now, it has a light spring pushing forward. It has a camming surface pushing rearward because of this torsion spring that's pushing the whole thing over. So it now wants to go this way, but it's being stopped by this paddle. Once the paddle is released, it can jet back. Once it jets back, the whole thing slaps over. And then once she's over, you now no longer have the resistance of the heavy magazine spring, so the cartridge that's in the carrier can be shoved forward by the lighter magazine spring. A lot of this gun is, you know, more powerful springs overriding less power springs. That happens several times in the way this thing is set up, which is pretty wild. Now, specific to this example, unfortunately, this one was damaged at some point, and you can tell that someone took the time to repair it, which is good, because I've already had at least one person send me pictures of theirs that's missing this entire assembly here, with the paddle, with this bent piece of metal, with the two little coil springs, and with this, I would call it a sear in this case. All that was missing on theirs, and you could see where it had been torn off of this sort of inner plate because it was attached to this plate. Someone who owned this gun went back in and welded it, and when they did, I don't think they accounted for the difference in depth. And so now I'm having some cycling problems with this. Essentially, I filmed my video, it ran very well. That knocked some of the crud out of it, and honestly, without the crud, it ran more poorly because the crud was sort of spacing things like it was supposed to be. If you look at this one from the top right now, let me get where you can see that. This guy is not in line with the magazine anymore. It actually needs to, and you see it just overrode itself. It actually needs to be right about there. So I'm gonna have to put this guy in for some repair work. Should be pretty simple. I can either make a new sear or I can use a little solder to fix this one because it's not really a weight bearing thing. It's not a dangerous thing if it breaks, it's just an annoying thing. So I've got to adjust this about 1/8 of an inch further forward so that it actually locks right there, which is where it should be instead of here, which is where it is, because every once in a while I'm getting rim strikes on the tube and the whole thing's collapsing and jamming up. So pretty wild. Again, this one's been repaired with a weld and then a little bit of solder here to hold that spring. If you have photos of an original on the inside, please let me know. I'd be really curious. And then for those of you who are missing these assemblies, I know now at least one person's looking for them. I'm going to do my best to get in here and measure this. Some of this one is welded and pinned in place, and I'm not sure how much I can disassemble it or not. And I really rather not ruin one. If I mean, I could get back in there and grind it all out and re-weld it, and I may go that route in the long run, but right now it's mostly running. It just needs a minor adjustment, and I can get in and out of there really easily. So, really wild system, really complicated system in terms of the number of springs and a number of spring interactions, so it must be sort of balanced to and of itself. There are some out there, people have been reporting in that they have one or their uncle has one or whatever. No, you can't buy them new. And yes, I will do a much more detailed video in which we actually get to run this thing and do all the history when we finally get around to our repeating shotgun series. Now, that's something that I'm organizing over on our Discord if you want to join in. That's always been available to the public. It's on our website. Otherwise, you guys are just going to have to be patient because the plan is to do that one in chronological order. And there are a lot of guns from like the 1880s, 1890s, 1910s, you know, all that stuff. There's some wild stuff, and I really hope to bring you guys a lot of enjoyment. If you're new to the channel and you're just watching this because you got curious about the Alofs, please go ahead and subscribe, stick around and see what we'll whip up for you. All right, have a good one.
Go.